Dr. Lauren Burns, thank you so much for doing this.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
Well, it's our pleasure. It's one of these lovely things when I'm prepping for an episode with someone like yourself, and you've done so much. It's such an amazing thing to prep for, but also hard where you start, right? You know, Olympian, gold medalist Olympian, naturopath, nutritionist, author, speaker. You know, it's a lot to fit in. So, congratulations on all your success. I think a nice place to start is the circle of lifestyle.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and what is it?
Yeah, so the circle of lifestyle is something I really developed over the years. I very much, I guess, I had this part of my life that was the athlete for a long time, and that was leading up to the Olympics. And I was studying naturopathy and nutrition along the way, but then, you know, I guess in many ways it was like Lauren the athlete and then Lauren the naturopath. And then when I did the PhD, that really brought everything together. And so when I started communicating that a lot more, like I've been speaking now to audiences for over 25 years, and, you know, often it started with that Olympic journey really, and then key messages that the audience could take away from that. But more recently the PhD was in lifestyle and mindset of elite athletes. So, you know, and Professor Mark Cohen, who you've had on the podcast, you know, when he said to me, do lifestyle of athletes, I thought, well, that's a good idea. But when you look at lifestyle is so deep and so broad. And it's like you go down every different rabbit warren of lifestyle. So, you know, these, I guess, are elements that I feel are really important in our own self-mastery or a holistic development, whether it be for any human being or whether it's for an athlete. So things around connection, breathing, movement, values and planning, self-regulation, movement. So different elements that sort of make up aspects that I think we can all be empowered by.
Lovely. On the topic of self-mastery,
yes.
How important is others' connection?
Yeah, so I mean, I've really, you know, there's no way that I could have had the success at the Olympic Games, or, you know, even in other things that I've done without the success of other people. So I've always sort of felt very much that, you know, people and interpersonal relationships are so important in my life. But when I was doing the PhD, I mean, the first study that we did was 10 world Olympic and Paralympic champion athletes, and really incredible ones. Like some of your listeners may know them, like Ian Thorpe and Kathy Freeman, Lane Beachley, like very, very accomplished mastery level athletes. And what we found that they attributed their success at the Olympic Games was, you know, psychological skills was number one. We had performance factors, and then we included their lifestyle into that as well. And out of that data really came interpersonal relationships. And that's something that I didn't really expect to come through as such a huge theme. And it made me realize that, you know, interpersonal relationships are performance enhancing. And so I've kind of gone down this whole rabbit warren of relationships and connection and how to foster that. And I guess, you know, I've been doing some research with the Australian Institute of Sport and around relationships. And I think that it's something that often gets just, you know, some people are quite good at it, or they, you know, some allied health professionals get taught more about connection and relationships and that therapeutic alliance, but really it's a bit ad hoc. And so, you know, I just think it's incredibly powerful.
How do we, I mean, thinking about sort of high performance, and I know you coach lots of, you have a coaching practice, right? Thinking about high performance, how does social connection play a role in that? And then how do you go about fostering that for high performance?
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, I think in my own practice, it's really about building trust and rapport and, you know, really being there for your clients and asking questions that challenge them and help them to sort of, you know, often they know unless it's sort of more consulting and giving advice on, say, specific nutritional plans, but often it's guiding them to, you know, they often know the answers within themselves. So having the right questions that you can ask them to have those prompts. And when people make change of their own accord and they feel like they have a lot more autonomy over that, then often that's a lot more long lasting. So I think having the right questions and a toolkit of ways of getting the best out of someone and getting them to reflect. And I think also, I love the Proska and Klemensky cycle, which I learned back in my early uni days, was really that people are on a cycle of where they create behavior change, and that it's not always where they might meet you, for example. Like, you might be the first person that tells them something, and it could be something as simple as prioritizing their sleep or drinking more water, and they're not ready to make that change. And then, a year will go by or 5 years will go by, they'll talk to someone else, and then they might listen to a podcast, and then they'll read a book, and then they go, okay, now I'm going to change. And so sometimes you're on that cycle. And so I think, meeting people where they're at and not expecting that you might say one thing and then that person has to make that change immediately. It's about sort of helping support them where they're at.
Okay, so why do people come to you for coaching? I mean, there's lots of reasons, but and I'm sure you can. There's loads of different reasons why. But what do you find you help people the most with?
Well, I have a really diverse range of clients. So, I think often we start with one thing, but that's not where we end up, or that's not where we necessarily make the most impact in someone's life. So, for example, I had a client a while ago that came for a health condition that was pretty challenging. And I was like, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to help you with this, but we're going to give it a red hot go. So we did that, and we did make some really great changes there. But really what I think was probably the most impact for him was that I did a 20-year plan with him. And so I started to get him to think about what he wanted within his business and with his family, and some choices. He had an international business as well. And so when he might move overseas with his family, and giving back was really important to him, and volunteer work. So how to then structure things that he was doing to fit that in. And the way that when I work with clients around planning and structuring a 20-year plan, which can seem overwhelming for a lot of people, it's meant to be a joyous, interactive, dynamic document that you're constantly kind of, you're putting in your dreams and your goals and your hopes, and, things like your financial goals and your personal goals and your health goals and business goals, and where your family's at. In my 20-year plan, I've got my kids in there, and I put in their ages, what are their big milestones. And it makes you kind of realize how finite this time is when they're in your care. And, it's like, when do we want to have big holidays, and what do we want to do with this time? Or when do we want to do something around our house or renovation or whatever it might be? And it's kind of meant to be this, you put that, it's like dumping that mental dump. It's taking it out of your head and it's putting it down on paper. And I like to think of it as mercury. It's flowing and moving and ever changing. And it's not meant to be something that's set in stone, and you have to work really sort of doggedly to fix it. So yeah, with this client, I think for him it was actually a really big look at his life overall and what he wanted out of it. So that certainly was not what he came to see me for, but that's where we ended up. So that's really it's wonderful when that happens.
So finding purpose and getting your fulfilling potential out of the individual is something that I think more people need than ever. When you talk about planning and a 20-year plan, I think is interesting. I've always I got told once, try to have the longest view in the room. And everyone will write, a year plan or 5-year plan, but I think very few people look to 20 years. Why 20 years? And is that a tool or method you use with a lot of clients, or was that an individual case?
Yeah, well, and again, that's where they're at. If they're not ready for a 20-year plan, then we don't go there. That's fine. We can start with a year or a week. I've always been a big picture planner, and I even found, it was long after the Olympics, I found a plan of mine that I'd made when I was about 13. So I hadn't even found Taekwondo yet. And, I'd written out this 10-year plan, and it was all these things that I wanted to do, including, studying naturopathy. And I pretty much still wanted to do all of those things. I just found this incredible martial art that I really wanted to do. So that added in there 7 years of, 10 years or whatever of doing that. So I've always found it really kind of inspiring. But I find it's a great way for when I'm working with clients, it's a really good way for them to just see that big picture. And it's not so that we're always, to live in the future, but it's that sense of having that big picture, and then you can work down to years or weeks. And then it allows us to be in the present, and we're not holding everything. It's that mental load of we're not thinking, I've got to do this and I've got to organize that. And, sometimes when you map it out and you take that time, and, it can be a really lovely thing to do, grab a cup of tea, sit down, go through it. I love doing it at the beginning of the year. And then you can sort of say, actually, that's not going to work out for that year. Like, this kid's doing year 12, or this is happening, and we're actually decided to renovate that year. So that's not going to happen now for 3 or 4 years. So then I just put it out of my mind. I don't have to think about it. Or, if you're wanting to go back to uni and you're balancing a job and you're going to study and work at the same time, it's like, well, when would be a good time to do that? And like, I know for me, when I looked at doing the PhD, I decided that I jumped into it because when I had that opportunity with Mark, I looked at the time frame and I thought, I actually want to get this done before my kids are in secondary school. I want to get it done when they're little, and then I want to be more sort of just available and around, when they're teenagers. So that was a big goal for me, and I was like, right, I'm going to jump in and get it done at that time. So I also use a seasonal plan with clients as well. So I think sometimes, we were just chatting off air about, the seasons, and we behave differently in summer, and when we're outside and we're exercising outside more, and having dinners and lunches, and it's just a different vibe. And in winter, where it's much more sort of cozy and warm, and we might be making more nourishing soups and stews, and spring's a good time to do clean out your house and those sorts of things. So I think sometimes I've just got like a 1-page document that works in the season, and stick it on your wall, fill it in. It's a great way to sort of connect with your environment.
I love planning. I think it's addictive and it feels good, right?
Yes, yes.
It's one of my favorite pastimes. But what I've learned over the years is I'm okay with it not going to plan, if that makes sense. Sort of like having a plan is really important for me, but knowing that life is complex and random, and most of the time it won't go to plan. But yeah,
Yeah.
having that initial plan is really important. Where do people go, not go wrong with planning, but where do people struggle with planning, and is there a bit of framework or question to ask when going into a planning practice?
I think the more detail that you can put in there, the better, really, and sort of really drill down on things. I mean, I know, certainly when you're writing out goals, for example, and that kind of comes into planning, like, what do I want to achieve and what are some of the things that I want to do? Really kind of understanding a little bit of the rationale behind what you're doing and the why, sort of asking yourself, what is it that I want out of this and why am I doing it? And, if you're just doing it for other people's expectations, or you feel a pressure to do it, so asking yourself those questions can be a great way to get some clarity and go, actually, I don't even really want to do this. So it can be great to sort of make you realize what you want. Or when you write things down, you just think, God, I've got way too much in here. There's no way I'm going to have time for myself. And I used to do that a lot when I was an athlete. I'd always write my weekly plan, which I mean I still do now, especially my exercise regime. On a Sunday night I'll go through and I'll write that, because my week's always different. But when I was training, I was pretty enthusiastic about adding more sessions, and that was often to my detriment and getting injured and things like that. And so when you map it all out though, and then you think, well, where's the time to rest and sleep and recover and, do hot and cold, or have a sauna or a spa or whatever it might be, that those things are actually equally important. And we need those to refuel ourselves and re-energize.
It's a quite a big skill to work on your life as opposed to just be in it. Right.
Yes.
And you get some people who are really good at the big picture stuff, and some people who maybe struggle with the big picture stuff. And then the people who are good at the big picture stuff maybe get lost in the details of it and aren't as great there. If you and I were sitting down to do a 20-year plan and set some goals, what would be the first port of call?
Well, I mean, I think going to what excites you or what you really enjoy, because that's easy, so it's like, so either going with the things that are like, when's the big holidays you want to have, or let's pop in some of the big milestones, like when are you 30, 40, 50, 60, or when are the big anniversaries? Is there something we want to do for that? If you've got kids, popping their ages in, and that, they're really easy to just put in. You're just plugging in data essentially. But then you start to look at it and you go, oh, that's their first year of high school. That's their year 9 year or year 12 year. And so, yeah, I think combining the joy and the excitement of the things that you really want to do, and then, putting in those, just plugging in the data.
That sounds fun.
And then you've already got something that you're starting to craft that's personal to you, and you're looking at it and thinking, and then you can sort of, you can go deep into your sort of financial plans and, thinking, oh my God, and it just, it steps it out, and it's quite, I think, it can be eye-opening sometimes to look at the time, and sometimes you can go, oh, we've got a lot of time for that. Another time you think, oh, we don't have much time left for this,
100%. I think when you can get some sort of emotional connection to the plan, it lights you up a bit. And
so you have the long term, what would be the longest term plans that you do these days?
Do you know what? Already one of my takeaways of this is actually have that long time horizon. I'm very impatient, right? And everyone's always said the same advice in loads of different things to slow down. And whether it be business or athletic stuff, it's just slow down. Less is often more. And having a longer time horizon is probably needed. So I think the answer is I need a longer term plan.
Longer term.
This year I want everything right now.
Right now, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Which is often trips me up. With when you feel overwhelmed or sort of out of sorts, a bit unfocused, and same with your clients, what do you do to help you get back on track?
Well, for me personally, absolutely 100% is exercise. And, I'm very, values and understanding and living to my values and values-based decision-making is really important to me. And I found that a really powerful exercise. And so one of my core values is movement. And so I just have to move my body in some way. And going to the gym these days, it's mainly strength work. So if I can get there 5 days a week, I'm a really happy person, and that kind of alleviates any kind of pressure that I have. Even if it's quick, if it's just a half session, or I don't really feel like it. Or, the other day I actually was running around, and there was all these things that happened in my day, and I didn't have my gym clothes with me. And so I was doing an arms day, and I just went, you know what, stuff it, I'm going to go in my jeans. And so I walked in. I've got jeans and boots on. I had a singlet on. And I just, it's a little PT studio. So although I look like a dog, I didn't care, because I went in and I got the work done, and then I felt great. And it meant that I didn't have to, what would have happened is I'd pick my kids up from school, take them to their activities, and just all the things, life gets in the way. And then I never would have done that session. But I thought, well, I'm here and I'm just going to go and do it. So, for me, it's movement. But, when I talked with my clients, it's also working out what's right for them. And then to have those anchors that they go back to and they put those things in. But, if we can not just do it when we're stressed, or run down, or we're burning out, if we can put those self-care practices in as regular things that we have in our diary, that we sort of, they're non-negotiable, that keeps us going.
Eloise and I were talking last week about how just different dog breeds, and it's so obvious with dog breeds of the dog he's all uppity, needs a walk, needs to be fed. It's obvious when it's something else, but then you apply the same methodology humans of okay, well, what breed of dog are you? And when I'm often feeling unfocused, I'm like, all right, I usually need a walk of some description. Someone needs to walk me. I need to go to the gym, do something like this. I need a snack. I need some sort of mental stimulation, right? The little dog things they have where they put the peanut butter inside and they got to try and find a way in. I need that kind of mental stimulation. So if I get those three things, I'm usually good. But everyone's a different kind of dog breed, right?
That. Yeah, well, I don't know what I am, but I'm something that needs movement. And then, maybe a Labrador or something, stick me in a hot tub and I'm pretty happy as well. So in water. And we put a hot tub at our place, a lovely cedar hot tub, a few years ago. And I thought the kids would use it more than we do, the teenagers. But, I'm in it almost every day, and I just find it's I don't take my phone in there, and I just sit whether it's in the evening or first thing in the morning. My husband and I will sit in there and have breakfast and, a cup of tea or whatever. And by 6:30, we're out the door. But we just have that time together and that connection where we're not kind of on our devices, or we're not at the end of the day when we're really wrecked. We just sit there and we just kind of chat about different things. And that's something that I really miss when we're too busy to have that time. I really miss that.
Is it is it the heat? Is it the sacred space, no phones, or is it just, what is it about the hot tub specifically?
I think, well, maybe Mark can answer this about, thermal regulation and heat shock proteins and all of that. So I think there's a healing benefit to being in hot water. And I mean, just being in water, I often stretch in there and, kind of move around in the water. But I think also the fact that there's no phones and we kind of do chat. We're pretty good morning people, so we can chat through things too that we don't always at night. We're just too exhausted to think about, kids doing this and that and whatever, just life admin stuff. So that's kind of easy in the morning. We're just like, oh yeah, you'll do blah blah blah. We just run through it.
That's a great takeaway. All the boring conversations, all the life admin stuff, which that
Yeah,
just
and it's just sort of quick, and we're in the hot tub, and we're having
exactly.
breakfast, coffee.
Yeah.
And it's nice. It's a good way to start the day.
So I need a hot tub is what I'm saying,
Yes,
right?
you need a hot tub. Yeah.
Love
Well,
it.
you'll be good over there. You guys are it's pretty cool all year round.
Yeah, more of a need, right? Does it get it doesn't get a lot of love in the summer, I bet.
Well, you cool it down. It can be a cold
Okay.
plunge. Yeah.
Oh,
So
very
actually,
good.
my son, I made him go to the gym with me this week, and he was like, "Oh no, I'm not coming, and I don't feel like it, and I'm not." And I said, "Well, I've got your gym clothes in the car. We're just going to go and just do it, and you'll feel better." And he's like, "Oh," he's 15. And he loves going to the gym, but he really wasn't into it. But he's had a hand injury, so he's got plaster and he wasn't doing his other things. And I'm like, well, you just got to keep your body moving. Come in and do it. And so then afterwards, he's in the back of the car and he's like doing, air boxing. And he's like, oh, thanks. I feel great after that. And so he feels so good. But now tonight he's like, he's got this really sore chest. And I'm like, that's great. And he goes, will the hot tub help me? And I'm like, yes, hop in the hot tub. So he's just been out there actually.
That's great. I think there's something about we've spoken about a reasonable amount on this podcast, but shared physiological states. So whether it be sweating together, Eloise and I have done a cold plunge together, often in a hot tub or a sauna, and something about the shared physiological state bonds people together. And it's an interesting line of research. I wonder if the hot tub would be in the same wheelhouse there.
Yes, I wonder. Well, I mean, I love when my son, he was coming to the gym with me like a couple of times a week, and I loved working out with him. Like I really enjoyed that. But actually, interestingly, with the research that I did with athletes and relationships, there was quite a lot that I sort of went down the rabbit warren of just being next to someone, in a quality attachment relationship attenuates your stress levels. So even just being next to someone that you feel really connected to can have a real dampening on your, cortisol level and heart rate and, different stress markers. So it is pretty powerful.
Wow. What else? What were the key? I guess what surprised you most about your research here?
Well, I think that was pretty interesting. And, then because I went down, I was, reading a lot about relationships and connection and, attenuating stress and that stress buffering effect of relationships or stress resilience relationship. And I read this great article that basically what they did was they did this trial where they had 3 different women. So they had one woman who was with a partner who was she was in a quality attachment relationship. So she married. Then a woman who was in an okay relationship, pretty good. Her partner was there, and then they had a woman who had a stranger holding her hand. So they had these 3 women and these 3 men holding their hand, and then they gave them the threat of an electrical impulse. So they did actually zap them. I don't know how they got that through ethics, but they did zap them. But as they went to give them this electrical shock, they measured a lot of their stress markers, like their heart rate, glucocorticoid levels, and cortisol and everything. And what they found was the woman who was had the stranger holding her hands. Everything was just off the charts. The woman who was in the good relationship, again, everything was really elevated and actually not that dissimilar to the stranger. The woman who was in the quality attachment relationship, her markers were almost undetectable. So that dampening effect of being with someone that you feel comfortable with can really change your stress response. And, I think we all know when we've felt we're with a friend or a partner that we feel really connected to, or a parent or, a family member that we just feel so comfortable. And whether it's, having a laugh with them or a good conversation, or, and you walk away and you're just like, everything feels great. And, all your worries just don't seem as big. But actually it is the physical proximity as well. It's not just those great conversations. So I started to think about that in the sense of really high pressure situations. So like when you go to an Olympic Games, everyone's feeling pressure. So it's not just the athlete, but, the coach, the support team, everyone wants to do more and support the athlete and get the best result. And everyone kind of gets a bit often edgy and tries to like support team, like the team manager or whatever, who you'd never really maybe see, is suddenly in your face asking if you need water and a towel and whatever. It's like, dude, go away. Like, so people kind of respond differently to stress. And so, if you're standing next to someone that you feel really connected with, that's going to be helpful in your ability to go out and perform and have executive function and cognitive function and make split decisions and all of those things, because you're going to be more online, you're not going to be as elevated in that stress state. So, and then conversely, if you've got a coach who, you have a fraught relationship and you've got unresolved conversations, or you haven't had the difficult conversations that are hard and no one wants to have, but they're really important to build that trust and rapport. Or, something's happened in selection and you don't feel good and you with this person, then that's also going to affect your ability to respond to stress. So I just found that really fascinating. And so I ended up writing a piece for the British Journal so that was written up in the main work that we did. And then I wrote an editorial piece for the British Journal of Sports Medicine around how do you strengthen interpersonal relationships in sport. And so it was starting to kind of, I think, have this conversation. I think it's just a small part in the jigsaw puzzle, because I think it's actually, there's a lot more there that we're just uncovering. And then we did a study recently that was looking at the characteristics of gold medal winning support teams. So we interviewed gold medal winning athletes and gold medal winning coaches, and we got them to sort of rate, what are the characteristics that we had in this support team when I won my gold medal. So there were things like ways of working, teamwork, communication style, emotional management and competition, that sort of thing. And it was interesting because there was just this there was a slight difference with the athlete. Was very much like they understood me. There was a bit more of an emotionality there, like they really understood who I was and what I needed. And with the coach, there was a little bit less of the emotionality, but still in the same themes. So it was a bit more like they knew what to do. They knew the process. So that was interesting. And then we because I talked about in my work with Mark around using the traditional sort of working alliance or therapeutic alliance that you'll find with health professionals, which is that strength of the bond between client and practitioner that helps therapeutic outcomes. And so really we called it the performance alliance. So really saying that in sport, that connection between athlete and coach, or athlete and any of the support team, is a performance alliance. And how do we teach that? And how do we need to have, say, coaches, for example, really understand that relationship building has a huge impact on their performance. And there will be some professionals in that support team that get taught that. So like the sports psych will understand that working alliance, or possibly the physio, or maybe the dietitian, whoever's had that training. But, often coaches don't have that training and managers don't have that training. And it's sort of getting them to understand how that looks. And, I've been doing some workshops recently with sports and coaches. I just did one last night for Coaching Snow Australia to their coaches. And, things like, it's not that I have the answers, but it's trying to get them to start thinking about, like, what does a healthy network look like? What do you need? How do you evaluate that? What's a framework that you can use to reflect on that relationship building? And then what does the coach need? Because often the coach is, needs as much support as an athlete does. And, if they're at a big event, let's say you've got an Olympic Games, it's a 2-week competition. They're at the end of that. They might have a 10-day competition. By the end of that 10 days, if they've made finals, the coaches, they're managing a whole range of different athletes that all have emotional needs and physical needs. And then they have to be, really on their game and making split decisions and, coaching strategies in the moment. So, they also need a level of self-care and sleep and nutrition and all the things that I think athletes need, but coaches often don't prioritize that for themselves.
I think mistakes come from blind spots, right? And if you can remove blind spots, you remove mistakes. And I just think how many mistakes or missed opportunities in sport and maybe in other areas of life as well have come off the back of a lack of this cohesive network, of this social support sport grid. And I think my background sort of health, startups, entrepreneurial stuff. And, I've always been lucky to have, my partner Eloise, very supportive of that. And I often found that it's lovely to have, and it's very lucky and very privileged, but it's performance enhancing because you have a secure base of which to go and do your thing off. I imagine I haven't been Olympian, but I imagine it's similar. You have a secure base of that network from a professional element where you can go off and maybe take the risk and fall back on it. And I can see how it would be a really important.
And you need to make mistakes within what you're doing. I mean, a big part of sport is that the mastery level athletes have this ability to, they evaluate, they're sort of going through this process of, like, planning, there's an outcome, maybe they didn't perform, what went wrong, how do I fix it? And they're there's this sense of that self-reg loop of what do I need to do? And part of that is how you work out your arousal level. Like, you don't want to be too hyped, you don't want to be too low. And you think about music is a really a good indicator, I think. You pump up that really high pumping music and you're like, yeah, right. And you don't necessarily want to be up there. I mean, some people might. You don't want to be listening to the really calm, classical, but where are you in that? And the way that you find that is through practice and making mistakes. I mean, I had that in the ring where I'd get myself so pumped up and then, like, that was not where I made my best decisions, or likewise when I was too relaxed. But, where do you kind of get into that zone? And once you start hitting that point of knowing where your zone is, then you can, you start to master that. But you have to make those mistakes. So having people around you that help you do that. And I think, I worked for a while with the Australian Institute of Sport. They had a gold medal ready program, and we partnered with, it was run by psychologists, and then we partnered with Army commandos as well. And so they had this process where they called it a hot wash. So straight away when you'd walk off the mat, and this is what they did in, military situations, you'd have this hot wash, and it was just like, say what it is right now, what happened, and it's that they called it the 3 F's. So frank, fearless, and factual. So, there's no judgment. It's like, but we're a high performance team and we want to get the best out of everyone. And, in a military situation where it's really life or death, that's pretty important. But they were sort of using that to talk to athletes about coming out and just saying what it is, what went wrong, what you can fix, how you can, but in the moment when everything's fresh. And then later to do, they called it an after action review. And it's sort of that, or deep soak of when, a bit later where you can sit down, watch the videos, go through a bit more strategy and where do we change things? Where do we keep going? Where are we at on track? So I think that sort of having that feedback with people that you really trust as well, and that really genuinely you're on the same wavelength and on the same path.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I imagine that sort of that tight to have a tight feedback loop between you and your team, you need that underlying trust and foundation, right? And then the
Yeah.
faster the feedback loop, the more you can learn and iterate and actually get better as a team.
Yeah, I
Which
mean,
is,
I had an amazing support network, really very incredible. My strength and conditioning coach, my physio, my sports, I had 2 sports psychs, everyone was incredible, my club coach. But I had, my my Olympic coach, sorry, we had, because he'd just come out from Korea, he was very young, there was a lot of cultural differences. And so we actually had we fought a lot. I mean, he came out and, I don't know that he'd ever really had a lot of women, especially, asking him why he chose to do things. I mean, that was just unheard of in Korea at the time. And so to come out here and all these athletes are like, oh, yeah, that's kind of good. Why are we doing that? And he's like, well, you don't ask why. And so, we were like, well, we do. We're interested. I mean, everyone like our strength coach is like, we're doing this and this periodization because of this, because of that. We're like, awesome, that's great. Total buy-in. And so we would have all these arguments, and it was really, really tough. But the thing that I think, as a result of that, those clashes and the arguments, and there were things that were not necessarily healthy, but we did have a lot of those tough conversations. And I think going into the Olympics at Sydney, we were very attuned and congruent and aligned, and we trusted each other that if we said that we weren't going to do something, we weren't going to do it, or we were. Like, if we committed, if he told me something in the ring and I said, yep, okay, he knew I was going to go in and try it. Whereas if I said, I don't think that's going to work, he knew I wasn't going to do it. But it took us a long time to get to that point.
sure.
So having tough conversations is difficult, and I think in really high pressure situations too, they're really necessary.
Tell us about your time in Korea.
Oh gosh. Okay, so my first time in Korea, I vowed never to go back after the first time. I did go back 12 times. But the first time I went, it was just the rudest cultural shock I've ever experienced. So, I was quite young. I mean, I don't know how young I was, but, 19 or something like that. And we were training in minus 15 degrees, and we were running up mountains and in the ice, and like there's ice all over the ground, and where people are doing their ankles, and it was just crazy. We'd train in these martial arts. We'd often go to martial arts universities. So you've got, at 5 a.m. in the morning, you've got everyone running up the hills. You've got the wrestlers and the judo players, and they're all doing, carrying people on their shoulders and doing crazy things like that. And so we were doing this run, and they beat us with bamboo sticks. So we came, I was running late. I was actually running last with this young girl, and she was really scared. It was because it was in the dark, and we've got ice coming over our scarves, around our mouth and everything. And so I was helping her, and then, this coach, the Korean university coach, he's like, right, okay, we've done one lap, get down on the ground, push-up position. They beat us with these sticks just below our backside. And then they're like, if you don't, make this time, then we'll beat you again. So I took off and I left the 15-year-old for dead. I was like, right, I'm not getting hit again. And I just went, and I was just thinking, like, what the hell happened? And I ran, and I was like, I'm going to beat that time. And I did it. I came in, I beat the time, and he just did it again. He just beat us all again. And it just demoralized the entire team. Like, we'd never had anything like that. And it just was really contrary to the way that, I guess, in Australia, that was not a way to motivate the team. And so we'd had quite a great trip up until then. And then the whole team kind of imploded. And actually, most people on that trip never did Taekwondo again. I mean, we had welts on our backside 2 weeks after when we got back.
Gosh.
So it was pretty bad. And so as I flew, left the country, I was like, right, that's it, never going back there again. But then we had a tournament it was leading into, because when I competed at the Sydney Olympics, it was the first time Taekwondo had ever been in the Olympics as a full medal sport. And so there was a lot of politicking and kind of, events to get Taekwondo into the game. So we had this IOC international competition, and it was in Korea. And I was like, I wanted so badly to go to this comp, but I didn't want to go back. And I was so scared that they would hit us again. But I guess my drive to compete was so much bigger. So we went over, and I actually won that competition. I beat the Korean in the final, and it was a big thing because I remember thinking, I've run up your bloody mountain. It was a girl that I'd trained with at that martial arts uni, and I was like, I've run up your mountain. I've been hit by your coach. We're exactly the same, and with only differences in the head, and I'm going to outsmart you. And I was just like, so it was a really big thing. But then I kind of had this love for Korea, and I really fell in love with so much about it. Especially the food. The food was amazing. And bathhouses over there are amazing. But, they were the best in the world at the time. And, the playing field's leveled a little bit more now, but it really is the birthplace of Taekwondo. And what I loved about the Korean Taekwondo practitioners is just the incredible excellence in execution. Like, their moves were just so perfect and so beautiful. And, it was like the simplicity. And I remember going over there and training with he was basically a kid at a high school. And that's sort of like, everyone in Korea is, when they're doing Taekwondo at that level, they're all just so good. And he just kept doing this one kick, and it was just a back leg roundhouse kick. Like, it's the most commonly used kick in all martial arts. And I just couldn't outsmart him. I couldn't move out the way. And I just thought, how beautiful is that I know what he's going to do. I can see him coming, and I still can't get out of the way. And I tried all these, I'm going to just move footwork out the way. I'm going to do back kick when he counter with this, nothing worked. He got me every single time. And I just love that beauty and the simplicity and, doing the simple things with excellence. And it made me think about, mastering the basics. And so I always used to just, basics, and having them so proficient in those simple exercises.
It reminds me of the Bruce Lee quote, right? Fear not the man who's practiced 1,000 kicks, but the man who's, or man or woman,
Yes.
who practiced the same kick 1,000 times.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly
right. Please you go.
Yeah, well, I actually had a similar thing when I had both knees operated at the one time. That was the one time I really thought I might retire, and I was out for the World Championship selection, and I was so devastated. I mean, I just couldn't. That was the biggest thing in my life at the time, and I just felt like the world had ended. And here I am laying at home on the couch with both knees immobilized. I'm on barely walk on crutches and everything, and I'm feeling pretty sorry for myself. And then, about a month went by, and I started to move around a little bit, and I thought, I can do one kick. I can do one kick. So if I can kick, I can fight. And so I went to my coach, and selection had already sort of, all the forms had gone in. And I said, do you reckon you could get me a late application? And he was like, I don't reckon, you've just had double knee surgery. I don't reckon you can fight. And I was like, look, I can do this one kick. Can't do it that well, but by, give me another month when the comp is, I'll be fine. So he's like, all right, we'll put it in. And then, so I got to that competition, and that's all I did. I just did one kick, and I had, 4 or 5 fights, and I just did that same kick. And I won the comp and got, selected on the team. But, because I used to think about those Koreans, and that absolute simplicity in doing that. And, everyone knew what I was going to do. But it was just like a back leg counter. That's all I had. Yeah,
I think we live in a world that overvalues the complex, right? And ignores that simplicity at the other side of the complex. But you got to go through it to get to that one kick or that, that mastery level thing, whatever it may be. You seem to have a pretty unique mindset. Is that born, or did you develop that?
I think probably my family had a big influence on my mindset. I mean, my dad was a pop star in the 60s.
You're right.
Yeah, so he was in Australia, he's very well known. Like, middle-aged women pretty much still froth at the ovaries if they see him. And my mum was a professional dancer. I mean, he spent a lot of time in the UK, actually, with Barry Gibb, and Bee Gees wrote quite a few of his songs. And so he was very much about, that was really a passion for him when he was young, was music and following that path. And same for my mum. I mean, she taught herself to dance from swap cards, just laying out swap cards and doing all the positions. And I mean, it's pretty beautiful expression of, intrinsic motivation. And I used to think I was very different to mum, she's a dancer and I'm like into combat and martial arts, but actually they're very similar, the discipline and everything. So they were very much into meditation, and, they kind of found this Guru Maharaji in the 70s, and they went vegetarian. And, I remember going to Italy with them to a big holy water festival where the guru would spray everyone with coloured water, and they were just kind of like so they didn't really put a lot of pressure on me to do anything or be anyone, and they were always about following your passion. And I think I did have a lot of intrinsic motivation from that. When I started Taekwondo, my parents never drove me to a class ever. So I would just find a way or get some other parent to drive me, or I just always found ways. And I think that was actually a strength long term, was not to sort of expect that things were handed to me, or, that I had to kind of, work for them in a way that was really what I wanted to do. So I mean, they encouraged me to do well, and if that's but really kind of that I chose a bit of my path. And I think actually I went to a progressive school in Melbourne that didn't believe in competitive sport. And so there was a lot of unstructured play and, making up games and things like that. And I think that's actually, well, now, when I looked into the research around athletes, that is actually quite a big, strong determinant for athletes who, not the athletes that win a bronze medal, but ones that go on and win, like big competitions, is early diversification and unstructured play. It is, it's in the literature a lot. So I think a lot of it came from that. But actually my time in Korea and the really tough, often unpleasant experiences in martial arts actually gave me a lot of discipline and structure and mental toughness, because it's very physical, not as in doing the moves, but combat. You got to really be on your game when you've got someone trying to kick you in the head. I mean, now I just think, oh my God, concussions and things like that. But it's a very kind of raw sport. And you're in the ring with someone else who's actually trying to kick you. It's quite unusual. Yeah.
I think when you have such a downside by getting it wrong, the learning is much faster.
Yeah. That's right. There's a lot of bruises if you don't get it.
Yeah. Chess with dire human consequences.
Yeah.
Lauren, I know you're into health and obviously performance, and you're a naturopath, nutritionist. In the last 5 years, is there any health practice? Could be the jacuzzi, could be a new diet, whatever it is. Is there a new practice that's really moved the needle for you in your own life?
Well, yes, from a personal level, I think because I've been in, exploring perimenopause, definitely insulin resistance and managing glucose levels has been really big. So really kind of paying attention to that. I love the Glucose Goddess and some of her work. I think she's been a great educator for, managing and stabilizing glucose levels. So, having protein first or having your veggies first, and having carbohydrates last in a meal. So that's made a massive difference to my energy levels and mood. So just being quite structured in a few elements has been really big. So for me personally, I generally eat 3 meals a day and I have a rest break in between. So, it's like I found that fasting really wasn't a great thing for me, but having that 5-hour window where I'm not eating has been just absolutely brilliant. And that food order, and then, doing some movement straight after a meal. So, moving your muscles has been a game changer.
I completely fasting got way overhyped and everyone took it as
Yes.
scripture. And
Yes.
me as well. I took it so seriously for, I don't know, 3-4 years, and actually,
Did you? Yeah.
I didn't feel good. I didn't feel good. Just
Yeah. Yeah.
so up all the time.
Well,
Um,
I used to cut weight for weight divisions and, I mean, I always did it pretty well. I mean, early on, I maybe didn't do it so well and had to sauna it off a few times, which wasn't good for decision making in the ring. And for the Olympics, it was 49 kilos. So I had to drop it fair. That was really tough because it was way below my natural weight. And so fasting just felt like torture again. I felt like I was back doing that. I didn't, I spent all my time I was hangry. And so, yeah, but having that time in between, now for me, yeah, it makes a huge difference.
yeah,
But
it's
we are all individual, and not every that's what I think. I love personalized medicine and finding what's right for each person.
mm,
I don't think there's one diet for everyone, and it's certainly not just to say everyone needs to do fasting. It's just not appropriate, especially with where people are at with illnesses and they might be convalescing or they've just come out of burnout. When you're really tired and exhausted, your body just doesn't have the vitality to do, a lot of fasting.
I think so. And also the sex differences of, fasting for
Yes.
men is very different for females, and depends on the time of the month and what age, and
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
it's so complex. To have one approach would seem, I don't know, too simplistic, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
with people who aren't familiar with, the world of being an Olympian, or the world of coaching for high performance, or trying to give people some sense of purpose in their life, what would people who aren't in your world be surprised to know about your world professionally?
um I think maybe let me think. What would they be surprised? Probably that I always do the kind of boring things. And what I mean by that is, and I learned this as an athlete, like you got to do the rehab. If you've got an injury, you got to do the band, like the TheraBands. They're boring. No one wants to do them. No one wants to do rehab, but I just turn up and I do those boring things. And so, for me, it's about consistency. And, I have had a lot of injuries in my life. And so now, my goal in my physical health is to be strong and fit and do things with my kids into my old age. Like that's really, I want to be doing things with them, and I don't want to do crazy things now that stuff that up and then I have other injuries and I can't actually do anything. So I'm very much about turning up and just doing whatever I can. And that's not always, it's not about, always pushing myself and striving, and it's being kind, and I often have this little voice in my head that's always going, go Lozzie, you can do it, you got this, or keep going with those bands, like they're shit boring. For a while recently I did something to my shoulder and I couldn't lift it for like 3 months, and so I'm in there doing the bloody bands, and it's just, but it's turn up and do what you can. So I think that when people think about high performance, and especially athlete, combat sports, being really driven, that there's a sort of level of really fierce determination, but actually I'm quite compassionate to myself.
It's important. I think a lot of people have slightly a negative internal voice, right? And
Yeah.
actually, yeah, what advice would you give to someone who has a negative internal voice and wants to reframe it in a slightly more positive way?
Well, I think firstly just being aware, like it's not necessarily turning off the voice, so it's just being aware that that's there, and then trying to find ways that, how could I think about this differently, and that's, just reframing slightly. So the more that you ask yourself that question and you start to then talk to yourself in a different way, then that starts to build those neural pathways. I also think the doing is a really powerful practice. So, I often talk about, I get often when I'm doing workshops and things like that, I'll get people to do a, to be list. Who do I want to be? And then do the actions. And sometimes you don't feel like that person. And this sort of came from my coach, my club coach, Martin. And he said to me once, are you here in Brunswick at the club, or are you at the Olympic Games? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm at the, like, and he was saying, are you being an Olympic gold medalist, or are you just being, you trying to be one? Now, I wasn't an Olympic gold medalist, but what he was asking me was, how do you want to act as though you are a gold medalist? And so start being that, start acting like that every moment when you're at training. And, for a while it took a bit to sink in, but over the months, I started to go, actually, there's these little tweaks, and it's footwork, and it's body posture, and it's confidence in the ring, and it's commanding the space. And it was just these tiny little things. And so it started to shape that. And that was, 24 years ago. And I think that made quite a big difference for me in the way that more about the way I held myself and walked into the ring and composed, the ring craft, not so much the actual, skill level of a kick. But now I ask myself that question in so many different other elements of my life. And I often get, participants in my talks to do the same thing. And it's like, how do you want to act if you're a really fun partner? Like, what are the actions you want to do? Do the things and then see how that feels. You don't have to always think, I'm not that, I can't do that. What are the actions, that you want to do if you're a really engaged parent? What are those things? If you're a really great friend, what are the things that you want to do? And just do it. Pick up the phone, call your friend, organize to have dinner, go for a walk, meet them at the gym, whatever it is. And then the action shifts that mindset. So I think that movement and doing is really, really powerful. And I guess that's sort of that point of like, just show up and do the things.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I did it when I was studying, and I was like, how would I act if I was a really productive student? And often it was like, well, sure as hell not what I'm doing right now, procrastinating, putting some food on, doing another load of washing, whatever things that were stopping me.
Yeah.
But then it was like, how do I want to act? If I was productive and a great student, well, I'd put timers on and I'd organize my notes and I would not get distracted and I'd do these things. And so I would just make myself do the things that I thought made me a great, what I would be doing as a good student.
That's a lovely reframe as opposed to a goal. What I want to have is who I want to be, right? I think
Yeah,
that's
who I want to be. Yes.
yeah, a really, really actionable takeaway that. Last question before, I mean, I speak to you all day. This is so fun, but the last question is about a sort of like your philosophy to life. Have you got any sort of guiding quotes or ideas that come to mind throughout your life and you try to stay consistent with, or how do you think about that?
Well, I think really following your joy and your passion in life and having, going down different rabbit warrens of things that you love. And someone said to me once, I was about to make a choice of where I wanted to live, and it was this big change for our family. And, this woman said, life's too long to not do that. Like, and I love that. Instead of life's too short, like, we have time often, do different experiences and jump into things. And, you can always change your mind and do something differently. But, I do think in our society, we don't often contemplate death. And, when we get to the end of our lives, what do we want to look back and have done? And I think that, we need to work and earn money and pay for things and, whatever things, but, food and things can be really difficult as well. But what are the joys that we take in our life? And whether that's, going for a walk and breathing beautiful air, or catching up with a friend, really making those things a priority and thinking of that time when you are on your deathbed or something happens and you pass. What do you want to look back on? I think a lot of us will look back and think of the relationships that we had and the people that we connected to and the memories. Even like when I think now of my Taekwondo days, I often think of the team and the connections. And I just had my 50th birthday the other day, which was fun. And, I had like lots of my teammates were there that I'd traveled the world with. And, we were so kind of like focused on what we were doing. But actually, we've got these incredible memories of all the things that we did and these incredible cultures that we were immersed in and the food that we ate. And, they're the memories that I think when I look back on my life, that's what I will think enriched me.
Well, a beautiful answer to end on. Where can we find you? Where can we keep up to date with what you're up to?
So social media, Instagram is probably where I am the most, Lauren Burns Gold, and otherwise just through my website. So all my papers are there and you can contact me through the website. So just laurenburns.com.
Wonderful. Well, that was so fun, and I can't thank you enough. I've learned loads, and I'm going to go and
Oh,
write my
thank you
20-year
so much
plan.
for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, well, it was really, really great. And thanks for Dr. Mark for connecting us. So,
Yes, yes.
yeah, what a legend. Have a great one. And thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much.